Hi, I'm Grace Lynch. Welcome to my channel. So this episode, Wilderness Chronicles, I wanted to talk about one word at a time and dig into what life was like immediately after brain rehab and being treated by the clonidine. This happened in 2015 outside of Portland, Oregon, a little town called Beaverton. I had been treated by a neurologist, Dr. Howard Taylor, who had found the brain injury and studied me for about a month. And at the end of the month, he helped review things for me and explain that 27 years earlier, I had actually sustained a brain injury and experienced global aphasia for almost a couple of weeks. I'd never known that. I'd never gotten a medical interpretation for what I'd experienced when I woke up from my nap the next day and didn't understand what words were or what they ever had been. It took, even though words came back, I didn't understand what had happened to them in the first place. And because I had a form of meaning that worked in terms of my autism as anesthesia, sort of the music inside everything that went alongside language, and I'd been born with that, I didn't really properly know that anything had happened. I knew things were weird, but I didn't know why they had become weird. So 27 years later, I get an explanation. So when they gave me the clonidine, within about 3 days of it reaching a pretty high level, 1.5 milligrams, which is pretty high for clonidine, everything snapped back into place. And then I had to sort of refigure out how to put meaning as I experienced it together into language and express it. And it was very slow, very hard. The first months were very hard. I had to mostly I kept to myself. I'd come home from brain rehab to where I was staying, and I'd stay by myself. I'd go to the piano, a little upright piano. I'd play little notes because it was beginning of getting out some of the feelings that were happening. It was horrifying. I'd been away a long time. And so then I was still on the streets for another couple of years. And when I came back and started to get stabilized, I got formally diagnosed with the autism in 2017 by Dr. Brad Landsman. And I started learning about having PTSD. And then I got service connected. And as my life continued to stabilize, I started wanting to know what my experience had meant. I had gone on to study and get degrees in mathematics, computer science, and English because I could take language in and process it as long as I didn't have to actually do anything with it. I could put language out, but without the ability to really understand how it was going to land. I couldn't bridge the gap, and I didn't know that there was a gap where there was never supposed to be a gap. And so I didn't realize anything had happened. When I listened to other people's language, I listened to the shape or the pattern of it. I found that I could hear that instantly. When I had been a sophomore in high school, I could hear the crystal bell of Euclidean geometry. It was one of the most beautiful musics that I had ever experienced. And of course, none of us knew about autism or any of the different things in the early 80s. I think it was 1981. But so I got to get smaller glasses so they sit right. And then 2 years later, I found the calculus, and I loved the shape of the collapsing rectangles to create the integer or the integrals. I loved the sense of like approximating a tangent to a curve to get what differentiation was. I loved the stories about Newton and Leibniz, or Leibniz, I'm not sure which emphasis you put I think it's Leibniz. I think in Germany you do it on the second vowel. But in any case, I love the musicality of that. It made a certain sound to think about the Cauchy sequences, converging and all that kind of stuff. It made a certain sound to me, like a resolution in a piece of music, and it was like a very distinct thing. And that became how I learned everything. After I fell, that became much more powerful because whatever had been, like the structure I'd been raised to engage with the outside world, to talk to people about, and then doing my way alongside it was gone. And so in its place, I just started doing it the way that it always worked. When I was when I was grappling with meaning and understanding, the more that the diagnoses I found, the less I really understood about my case, because the doctor people would give me the diagnoses, and then I would expect that the next part is that you tell me what we're going to do about it. And every provider I met, any walk of life, inside or outside the VA, had never seen a case of someone who had complex PTSD, brain injury, global aphasia, autism, synesthesia, all this trauma, and then been left alone to work it out for 27 years. And even after I got diagnosed, I was still alone to work it out because there was no model for it. And so I was trying to re-engage with the world and found that it was very, very difficult because people didn't quite mean what they said, and they didn't seem capable of doing things the way that I did them. From my perspective, I came back with this sort of musical holographic sense of how things would go, and if somebody said something that wasn't true, it would make a music that wasn't real. It wouldn't sound right. And I didn't understand that they could not hear or experience reality that way. It continues to be very, very difficult to understand how somebody else's mind could work without that other thing. One of the qualities is that if I want to know something, I'll just feel how it needs to be as a concept. I'll just feel the whole structure of it like a distinct experience, and then once I feel it clearly, I'll know where to turn towards it in my mind. And once I know where it lives, it's already connected to everything else, and then I'll just build language to it and say it out. It's sort of like adding water to hot cocoa mix or something. It's very, very easy, but language comes at the end. And for me, like that, it's just much faster. I'm like, why wouldn't you just go directly to the concept and then apply the words at the end? Because the concept has to work in a certain way in order for your consciousness to exist at all. So go where the concept feels correct for your mind, and then build the words to express it that way. You know that it works because you're currently not dead. I wouldn't understand any of these things, why they have to do things the slow way. And one of the jokes that I had is like I'm grappling with what autism is, and I'd read about Dr. Temple Grandin, and I'd see the character that I'd understand finally why I love the fictional character Rain Man. Some of the other depictions that I was seeing in the media and different things, and talking with my son. He's autistic, but he's known for a lot longer than me, and there are a lot more young people are being diagnosed. I quipped, I call the people who are not autistic, I call them the almost people who live in the land of the sometimes true, because the people that are not autistic tend to almost be what they represent themselves to be, and the things they hold to be true sometimes actually are. It's kind of hit and miss. So when I couldn't have any medical care, and I also couldn't rely on any existing context to accurately describe my experience, not having a method for understanding was unsupportable, because my recovery, my health was driving me to find a way to re-engage with the world, to link back up again. And yet all of the tools available to me did not fit my experience. What was I going to do? And so that's what led me to start considering. I went back to creating the language box perspective. I created that in 2010, 2011, 2012. Where one word at a time, I brought the word into like an inventory kind of space. And I wanted to understand how I evolved the relationship with that word in the first place. And I would take that one word, and then I'd go back to experiences in which I had to struggle with the meaning of it. And then when I lined up all of those experiences, I could see the pattern of my own change in working through a new understanding of it. And that's how I first started to have my own experience of my transcontextual perspective. Like, it's got a distinct signature. That's what gives me my home base, so that I don't get lost anymore. People can say whatever they want, and I'll be able to take in their perspective and also relate it to mine, so that I don't have to fight with them, but I don't have to accept their word for things either. If it doesn't match with my perspective, I kind of live and let live. So I went back to that method, one word at a time, and then I'm remembering the things that I had memorized from mathematics, from from my mathematics life, and about consistency, and I'm trying to understand like the theories behind meaning, because I'm assuming everybody built meaning rationally. I didn't know at this time that we build it developmentally. I'm assuming people have a mindset or a rationale, that they're constructing language logically. So when I'm trying to look at what meaning is, and one of the first things I came up with is that meaning is something that's supposed to last. Words are supposed to stay put. The meaning of words supposedly stay constant. And then I had a problem. So then if I took that as kind of axiom, then I have a problem because it doesn't match my direct experience. The fact is, when I learn what a word means, then as I experience new experiences that involve that word, then I learn more about that word. So if I consider that word as having its meaning as being a box, then if I move along and have more experiences, and I ask myself, and then there's more meanings, and there's more things that go in that box associated with a word. And then if I ask myself between 2 points of time, is the meaning of the word identical, absolutely identical between those 2 points, yes or no? The answer is always no. So when I saw that, I realized that my direct experience is contradicting the possibility that there is a shared, or there's a lasting, continuous meaning. And I started to understand how social narratives flatten what meaning is and edit individual experience out entirely. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Because most of my experience, I have to work with it because my trauma is requiring me to integrate this. But the language available is requiring me to edit it out of it because it can't be flattened into some kind of collective universal narrative. And so one word at a time required me to develop the concept of perspective-based meaning. And as I started to develop this, I started more and more to love what I'm hearing and reading about quantum mechanics, and not all the like multi-universe kind of story nonsense. I'm not caring anything about that, but I really love the sense of using a mathematical concept to clarify a scientific situation. What I could understand is that there was a thing called the ultraviolet catastrophe, which they couldn't explain certain things that they were observing in data based on an older model. And a guy hit upon the idea to consider energy coming in packets. And when they considered the energy coming in packets, quanta, it resolved this observational data in a mathematical sense and helped birth what became quantum mechanics. And so that was very elegant to me. Did I know why such a thing happened? Absolutely not. But that helped set the stage for me to postulate that there was a perspective-based meaning. Is it the same as narrative meaning? No, but I took comfort in the possibility that a long time ago I had learned about in Euclid's day. There was a thing called the parallel postulate that said, given any line, then any point not on that line, there is one and only one line that can be drawn that does not intersect the given line. Well, that's one form of the parallel postulate. Another form, it gave us Riemannian geometry or spherical geometry around the geometry of the outside of the globe. Another one gave us hyperbolic geometry, which has been, my understanding, played a big role in imagining relativity. And so I look at one word at a time. I realize that for me, my kind of meaning, and I think a lot of neurodiverse kinds of meanings, it's better to consider a different postulate for what meaning is. In this, meaning is not shared ever. It is only perspective-based. And so two kinds of meanings never will agree, but they can relate. And if a person decides not to merge them into one, and instead try to figure out ways to responsibly relate them, then an entirely different form of language can be evolved. But it takes some care and tinkering, and that's what I've had to do for the rest of my life. So that's one word at a time about perspective-based meaning. If you like my work, please hit subscribe and like, and we'll see you next time. Bye. Stay wonderful.